Welcome back to the Inspire Health Podcast, and we continue on with our series on living freely. And I brought back one of my favorite guests that we've had on the show a few different times, Jonathan Hammond. And Jonathan is a spiritual teacher, energy healer, shamanic practitioner, and he is author of The Shaman's Mind, Huna Wisdom to Change Your Life. And I had Jonathan, I think I had you on the show a few years back, and then we had John again maybe a year and a half ago. We did a series on the illusion of free choice and sort of explored and extrapolated that. And that was episode 159. And with Jonathan, we did how to navigate apocalyptic times as predicted by Indigenous elders with Jonathan Hammond. So I'll put a link for that one too, so you guys can check that out. But always enjoy my conversations with you, Jonathan. I feel like we're on a similar wavelength, and I really like the way that you share the information that you know. I think it's in a really digestible fashion and incredibly timely. So I wanted to have you on here to share your perspective on living freely and wherever that goes. So welcome back to the show.
Love it. Aloha, Jason. It's so great to be back. Yeah, really great.
We'll have to see at some point. We got to make our way out to Hawaii and or Maui.
Hello. I'll take you around. You around.
That would be awesome. Why don't we just jump right into it? So, living freely. We've been exploring this concept, and part of living freely has also been, I've had different guests on here that have been challenging traditional hardcore beliefs that we've had around certain things that we've just assumed to be true or common sense. And with new information and new understandings, we're sort of challenging those. So part of my perspective on living freely is being able to be a little more open and allow different things in and filter them through your body and see how they feel. But ultimately, otherwise, I think we're kind of constricted by our own finite mind in many ways. But I'm curious to know from you, Jonathan, and all of the stuff that you've done, what does living free mean to you? And has it even changed over your years?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to learn to live free. I think if everyone who listens to this podcast knows this, but it's important to say out loud, the outward world is a reflection of our inner world. And so the outward world that we don't like is because we are thinking a certain way that is leading towards those results. And I think the biggest thing that we're missing in terms of our worldview, our individual cosmology as humans in the West, is our pervasive separation from the natural world, which is something that has been going on, and it is the background of how we see the world, that there's human culture, and then there is that nature thing outside, and that we are somehow separate from that. And that fundamental separation is the reason why our home is in trouble. And so from an ecological point of view, to merge ecology with our sense of self, to personally identify with the natural world as us, as a part of us, as an extension of our own body, opens us not only to being a whole lot nicer and taking care of the environment and the beings in the environment. We have spent 2,000 years thinking of that nature thing outside as a storehouse of resources for us, as the peak human identity, as the proverbial top of the food chain, as was given to us by divine decree in Genesis chapter 1, that said, dominion over nature, subdue it, it is for you. You are the lords of the universe. And that anthropocentric message has been so metabolized that we have then created, and with the one God, there's only one way to do it, with the one God, the one peak identity, and then humans have adopted their own version of a peak identity, which tends to be a certain kind of male, and the fun ensues from there. And so the idea that we reconnect with the natural world as us is our way home, and it's a different way of thinking. Even the idea of let's take care of the Amazon rainforest because it's the lungs of the earth. Well, no, how about we take care of the Amazonian rainforest because there are beings in there that have agency and love and a teleology toward purpose and care and a consciousness that we are that we are supposed to, and that would be so healing for us to attune to. And that attunement with the natural world as consciousness, all these different consciousnesses, is to re-enchant ourselves with our home. And so that's where my work is taking me. And it's not new. It is a return to the way in which the indigenous mind tends to think.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, Jonathan. One thing that comes up, and I mean, lots of stuff from everything you said there. I mean, when you were talking about Genesis, and I remember we had a conversation a while back, right around the Bible. And this is someone that had done a lot of work into it, and sort of looked at more of like an Aramaic approach to, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful, because I think what's happened too is in all of our texts, I mean, all of these things are, written and changed and interpreted in different ways. And I mean, he even did the Lord's Prayer, and he sort of explained it from an Aramaic language, sort of like, so saying like, these words mean something very different, or were interpreted in a different way. And I do wonder how much of what we have taken for gospel has just been misinterpreted, and either sometimes intentionally or just misinterpreted from language or from what the original intention was when it was first done, but has definitely put us on a certain path in many ways. When you talk about the return to nature, I completely agree. I remember talking with a good friend of mine years back, and we were talking about just what is at the heart of suffering, that everybody kind of experiences. And we just kind of came up with the idea was just disconnect, disconnect from self, disconnect from others. And at the heart of it was disconnect from nature, because I think that is that's our source. That's our direct, and from my perspective, that's kind of our direct source in many ways. And that's how divine expresses itself through nature. And the more we are connected to that, the more we are connected to ourselves and to others and everything else. In a world that is increasingly, I think, discounting nature, moving away from nature, even making people fearful of nature in many ways. I mean, the amount of people now that are terrified to even have the sun on their face.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, or even go to lakes or oceans for fear of like they're dirty or they're this or they're that. Like, I just find this coming up more and more, just even in my local environment around people. Where do you begin the process for people to start to genuinely reconnect back to nature?
Well, what comes up is to think of the natural world as not a background for our experience, but as all of these individual minds. The latest science is saying that plants actually experience five senses, have memory. Even there's something called plant neurobiology, which is in of itself an oxymoron, because plants supposedly don't have brains. But there's all this study done about that they have memory and agency and care, and they even share nutrients across species, and certainly animals the same thing. An indigenous perspective would say even rocks, microbes are agentive, meaning that they want something. That there is a purpose-driven teleology of everything in nature, and so it's not just the biodiversity. It's the psychodiversity. It is enchanted out there if one can attune to all of these different minds. And is it imaginative to make that connection? Yeah. Welcome to shamanism. Welcome to earth-based wisdom. That's what it is. But those conversations end up happening, and they can start. And those minds have medicine for us. So when we lose species, we lose minds. And we lose our connection with that, and those minds in nature are really no different than what we think of as spirit guides or ancestors or ascended masters or nature spirits. These are other than human consciousnesses that we're attuning to in our spiritual life, but they're right here. And so the idea that the New Age spirituality is taking us further and further off planet, when this place is enchanted if we would open to it. is part of what's even wrong with our contemporary spirituality. There's nowhere to go. I don't know where we're going to go. You know, the shit drives me crazy about, you know, this apocalyptic consciousness that we're all going to somehow become these energy beings that float away into a cloud of ice cream. I don't know where we're going. I don't know where we're going. And because it's right here, we're not going there anytime soon. And if we could re-enchant ourselves with the world, with our world, with the natural world, as us, as part of that, it's a game changer in terms of how we would think about being here.
I think that's brilliant, and I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's definitely been something that Tay and I have been talking about in the past too, and this sort of grounded spirituality here on this planet. And I like how you said, really, the sort of new age spirituality is taking us off planet. There's so much talk about everything out there that we're connecting to, and whether or not there is or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that I can go out my backyard and go into the forest, and I can have a direct connection with something very real right there with me. And my kids can't. I see it in my kids. I mean, if I watch what my kids do naturally, because we
Hmm.
do have a much more nature focused life, they get out and they talk to trees, they play with plants, they make stuff, they have a very different relationship with animals. Um, it's all very real, and it's grounded. And then I see that play out in how they navigate their life with other people and in the world, and just what sort of organically, I feel like it's in their connection to nature, I see more of who they genuinely are surfacing in the world, which is to me so important. Like I really want them to have a strong sense of who they are. And I feel like they get that by being directly connected to nature. You talked about all of these other minds that when we are disconnecting from nature, or in many ways, I would say like destroying nature, that we are disconnecting from those minds. You know, that's a really interesting concept too, because how I'm been kind of thinking about things is it's like you're either connecting to nature and to the consciousness of what nature is, or if you're not, what are you kind of connecting to? And part of it I feel like is it's because I see this, and you have conversations sometimes and you really feel like people are in very different places.
Hmm.
Um, I literally feel like they're connecting to almost more like a man-made program as
Yeah.
opposed to something that has been here forever, you know, and has so much depth and wisdom to it, as opposed to something that just feels like we're following a man-made kind of a script or something along those lines. I don't even know if I can articulate it exactly, but it just feels very different. And I just feel like I want to take people sometimes to just like go spend a week in the forest and just, you know, not that that's practical, but what do you find with that too? Do you feel like if we're
Yeah.
not connecting to that, we're sort of by default almost connecting into something else that's actually even not us?
And it is by default. And the easiest way to understand it is that there is a mental overlay that has an agenda to get your money, to get you to subdue your power, to put you in a curriculum of obedience to it, that is so pervasive and so nefarious. And the architects of that reality have left no stone unturned to make sure that we submit to it. And it is false, and it is something that we all in some way are plugged into. True healing, and even if it's just not even the capitalistic and patriarchal and all that, even the idea of family systems that say you're supposed to be like this, and sociological systems that say you're supposed to be like this, what men are, this what women are, this what, you know, this what, how you have to think about money, this how you have to think about what a life well lived is, and all of that, and all of that are just ideas. And so the other thing that I think is important to say about living freely is about that, that's about being in your body, because inside your body are your feelings and your emotions, and your feelings and emotions are the instinctive directive programming of the earth. We are beings of earth, and our feelings, that unsocialized, wild, unacculturated or non-acculturated instinct that we have, that shows up when you are invited to a party and you think you're going to go, but your body is saying I'm too tired, and you follow your body, and you can't do that because that's not what people do, and you go, no, I that animates me to do that. It feels like the right thing. It feels like, and so everything in nature is following and in creative engagement with what will bring it more life. And it is wildly interested in that which will bring it more life and wildly disinterested in that which won't. And everything in nature only wants to be what it actually is. The dandelion is not sitting there gnashing its I guess leaves, wondering if it should be something other than what it is. And we have that same instinctual programming that we come in with, what the Native Americans call the original instructions. And that's our true essence, and that's felt in the body. And the middle world culture, the man-made culture that you're talking about, does whatever it can to pull us away from our bodies and into it. Hence all the stuff about dominion over women's vaginas, and religious shaming about being in our sexual expression, and all of that. And it's all about getting us away from the directive life force, what Jung called libido, which is not a sexual expression as much as it's creative expression, deep from within us. And that energy is the energy of nature. That's the creative source, and that is evidenced all over nature. It's very horny out there, and everything it wants to create itself further, and has an instinctual appetite to do so. And if we could connect with that rather than what you think I'm supposed to be, it's a game changer. And that's what we have to unplug from and plug into.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. Um, hmm, so many pieces around there. It's funny you're even talking about that with libido and whatnot. I mean, I look back at some of the work with, bioenergetics and some of the different work from there. I mean, that was like your innate healing force. And it
Right?
became sort of turned into something that became sort of dirty, you know?
Yeah.
I think really to detract us from being able to connect to that type of power, I think, in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the pre-religion gods, the earth-based gods, Cernunnos and Hecate, those, they're celebratory of masculine, feminine polarities and sexual expression. And Pan is another one. Pan was sort of turned into the Christian devil, but Pan just represents that desire to live and to pursue pleasure, not hedonistic pleasure, but the pleasure that comes from living one's life. Pan is about all the things that make life worth living, and he became the Christian devil with horns and hooves, and this was the old god that everyone worshipped, as the generative principle of nature. But they didn't like that, they didn't want us to have access to that instinctual desire within us, and they turned it into something dirty and shameful and all that. But to go back to that, is to recognize that we are to self-advocate. Living freely is about self-advocating. And everything in nature is self-advocating and at the same time connected to the all by virtue of it being itself. So that's where I hope we go, because it's getting so phony and so false, and so crazy and so mentally ill, that there's something underneath that's just truth. It's
Mhm.
just truth, and you can feel it. Truth is a felt experience. I'm blanking on her name. She's so great. She was on your show, but you talked about truth being it's a felt experience, and it really is.
Well, and what I think is happening right now, because this is what I find when I'm conversing with a lot of people, is a lot of people just feel confused.
Yeah.
It's almost like this, and there's an aspect of that where they genuinely are confused, but I think it's because there's been such a strong disconnect between what they think or what they're told to think and then what their body's actually telling them, and that's been disconnected for a long time. And so then it just becomes this confusion, like either I just don't know how to deal with it or I don't want to deal with it, and then they don't really know. And I really feel at the heart of it is it's like it's not. I feel like a lot of times when we're confused, it's because we're at a disconnect between what we're thinking or what we're being told to think and what our body's telling us, and now we're out of sync with that. And the goal is really how do you get those back in alignment so that you know you're not thinking, you know.
And it's really hard sometimes. For instance, a lot of times with clients, they have an instinct to create something, and it's new, and they're going to leave the corporate job, and they're going to untether themselves from that, and they're going to follow their purpose, and we're doing all this work, and we're doing all this work to get their fear out of there and get their doubt out of there, and they're about to take the leap, they're about to, and then they go, but what do I do about health insurance? And it's a legitimate concern. And that's the nefariousness of the system that we're in, that even when we get to the point where we could make that leap, there's some aspect of the system that tries to keep us from it. It's really tricky, and that is confusing, because that's saying if I go toward that which is purposeful and natural for me, I'm consciously destabilizing myself and putting myself in financial danger. And that's what we have to unplug from. That's what we have to undo. And it's got a stronghold. It's got a real stronghold on so many people. It's really, really, really hard, and legitimately hard. It's not just someone's weakness. There's more to it than that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the linchpin that makes it incredibly difficult for people to make substantial change, especially as we go along. It's like when you're younger, it's definitely not doesn't have the same hold on you, right?
Mm.
You don't have as many tetherings, you don't have as many ties to things. So, I remember as a kid and picking up and went to Japan for several months and went there to train karate for a while, and I was just whatever I wanted to do. I'd be there train, I'd go take the train and zip off somewhere else, and like a real sense of freedom, because I just didn't have a lot of, as long as I had enough money to you know stay in my hostel or whatever it was that I needed to do, there wasn't a whole lot there. But as you get older and you have more financial responsibilities and you've got more dependents and you've got all these other things that kind of go along with it, it becomes a whole nother ball of wax to try to disentangle from. And this is why we've also had several conversations on here tying into just different ways of setting your life up and disentangling from different systems that maybe you don't want to be totally entangled in. And we're still in the process of figuring out those pieces. I don't think anybody has all of those things figured out, but I do think there's different ways that are more and more coming up to be in the system and operate in a way that does allow you more freedom and not so entangled in some of the other stuff. But it's a process, it's a process on trying to separate. What do you find with that when that comes up? Because I do think that is probably one of the biggest ones. You could have people going, I don't like what I'm in. I don't like the regulations over me that are holding me to have to abide by certain things that I'm no longer in integrity with, for example. I want to make a change, but I still have to pay my mortgage. I still have to do this. I still have, and to do that, it's a scary thing. Where do you find the line is for that, where people start to make that transition, if that's still in the highest good for them?
I uh, I can't say I do a lot of coddling of disempowerment. I can't say I do a lot of legitimizing of that. I am empathic to it for sure, but I think that there is always a way, and that we are co-creating our reality, and you've heard it a million times, but we really are. And if you're operating under a belief system that can't happen, then that can't happen. And so anything that is, and we also have to acknowledge that there are given circumstances. We are all fated, fated, fated with certain circumstances that we have that are part of it, that are mysterious, and that we came in with, and that we have to work with, and that we have to understand, and even spiritually explore. That are actually in service to our story, for sure. But at the same time, we have to recognize that all of those circumstances are actually gifted to us by the mother, not your mother, the mother. You know, to as the circumstances and the dynamics that will lead to the life that's right for you. I think the other thing to say is that the spiritual realms have no interest in supporting inauthenticity. You know, they just don't. And when you go to the spiritual realms and say, I want such and such, and it's not in alignment with your purpose, they're not really interested, and they're not going to help you. And but when we are following our authentic nature, when we are excavating and working with our original instructions, our instincts towards life, the spirits are all over that. The spirits are all over that. And so I think it's important to just name too that that being in one's inner essence, inner nature, is being automatically attuned with the spiritual support that will bring that authentic nature into being. So does that require some faith? Yeah, I think of the Fool card in the tarot, which is this guy, and he's got a little bit of belongings. He's got a best friend dog next to him, and he's got like a big smile on his face. He's got 1 foot off the cliff, and it's 0 in the tarot. It's not even 1. It's the beginning of the whole journey. But that leap of faith is where we all get stuck. But it is a leap of faith, and the idea being that the spiritual intelligences, the spiritual help, the spiritual support will present itself when we do it, when we take it, informed at the right time, for you, but that it's a really important thing that we all have to do. There's probably for every person 5 or 6 major iterations of oneself in a lifetime. And each one, as we move from one to the other, is scary in the same way. But if we can recognize that that's just what it is, and that we're supposed to meet that, and we're supposed to be okay with that, and we can get on with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that probably means a lot of reshuffling of what was once really familiar is now getting changed up. And that seems to push people's buttons as soon as we start to explore more change. And it's like there's this part of us that wants to have everything secure all the time and whatnot, but we're really here to have a diversity of experience, not to sort of just be on the. But at the same point, it shakes everybody, and I totally get that. You talked about authenticity, and that the spirit realms don't really support inauthenticity. And it's interesting because it's like we're in such a fake world in so many ways right now. Like whether it's people just talking about whatever they want to talk about because they become an influencer, and it's like, and they're spouting whatever. And that seems to get supported in the sense of maybe financial support, which a lot of people kind of look at, which then I think causes more and more people to want to sort of do things in a specific way. Or gosh, even look at like everything's like systems, it's like, here's what you got to do. And it's almost like there's no room for your authentic self to put back into the place to follow these sort of systems and algorithms on how everything is sort of done, especially in the world of like marketing. And right now I find like even there's so much like AI marketing and whatnot, and it's very algorithmic. And I'm sure there's a place for that, but how do you still infuse your own authentic self within that? Is there a blending of these worlds to some point from your perspective?
Well, there has to be. There has to be. And I think it's also important to say that the world is, through no effort of mine or yours, destabilizing anyway. So one can have success without spiritual support by domination or exploitation or all the things that we see all the time. One can actually have success, but it will have a hangover. It will have a cost. And so even though we see those trappings of success with those kind of agendas, they won't last. And that's what we're seeing right now. That's the sort of big change in consciousness, or in worldview or an outlook that's happening right now and will happen for the next 2,000 years, which is this sense of that we couldn't be more polarized, and the next 2,000 years is about moving toward unity. And the only way to move toward unity is to move towards something that is more authentic and real and truthful for everyone. But right now, the truth is all over the place. Truth is all over the place. And I think we just have to think of a sense of, I see all that happening. It's right next to me, and I have to simply create and stay in my lane and create a pocket of sanity for me, and for my loved ones or for my community, and attract other people into that pocket of sanity, because some of the people who don't want to participate anymore in the big, in the big shit show, we're giving them an option, something to unplug from and plug into. And I think that we do that. And the world's gonna, that's the essence of 5D consciousness, is that, 3D is that thing, Trump, Biden, and Palestine, and all that, and it's not that I'm ignoring it. It's just I can't do anything about it, and I can't create in it. So I'm not ignoring it. So I'm gonna know that that's there, and stay in my lane and create toward life, which is what everything in nature is still trying to do, despite the fact that we're not making it easy for it, And even the Lahaina fires, on Maui, 20 miles from where I live, was about nature saying, we're doing a do-over here. We are taking something back. And that was very much the message that I got. That was about, right after that happened, there was all this talk of conspiracy theories and laser beams from China and aliens, and no one was naming that this was fire and air and climate desecration that led to a hurricane 600 miles away that could not sustain, that with winds so strong that the current infrastructure could not take it. And this was about the mother saying, I'm going to take the original capital of Hawaii, the original kingdom of Hawaii, and I'm going to release it in fire. And get aloha out from behind glass in the museums of Lahaina, and make it into a lived experience. The mother knew what she was doing. It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. But and ultimately, that was my thought, and that was what a lot of the Hawaiian elders also felt. And so it's that. So the earth is retaliating. The earth is creating for itself despite. And we have to do that too.
Yeah, I think where a lot of that stuff gets to be difficult to discern with all the pieces is that there's just so much stuff going on. It's like there is manipulation of weather, and there has been for a long time. I still think it's actually funny, and I don't know if that's even a part of them what's causing pushback from nature. It's almost like all of these factors that are not natural that are causing more and more push. And then at a certain point, it's like how long can you hold the wave back? At a certain point, it's going to push back. And I really do feel like we are going to see a lot of very organic, natural responses to things that have taken place, because I just think we've pushed it too far. And it's hard to know all of the different pieces of it, but even around the whole bioengineering and geoengineering and these types of things, I was looking at a kid's book. This was a book we got for our kids. It was probably over 20 years ago, and it was on weather. It was just talking about like great storms, and it was basically a picture book, and it got into detail around like hurricanes, how they happen, tornadoes, how that. They had a whole section on weather modification and technology that they had used, and I'm kind of just laughing, thinking like, if people don't think that that's actually something that is going on, it's talked openly about, like in this book. I just was laughing. I couldn't even believe it. They're talking about putting like cement types of crystals and things like that, and what they were able to do for the Chinese Olympics to keep the rain from coming. And but I think at the end of the day, you can only do stuff for so long without there being some kind of pushback. It's like trying to suppress symptoms and not addressing the root cause. At a certain point, you can't suppress it anymore. Something's going to come back. And so I think we're seeing that in lots of different ways. And I have a feeling we're going to still see quite a bit more of it.
Yeah, and I think the root cause is anthropocentrism. It is the idea that I am so important, me human, so important that my event, that I am going to somehow manipulate nature for me. That is what's wrong with everything. That is exploitive, and that is uh, even cruel. Because and what it does to the psyche is saying that no matter what, my self-interest is of the utmost under all circumstances, and if I have to attempt to override nature to do that, then I'm on board. And that's why there's so much mental illness. That's why there's so much mental illness. That's why there's so much narcissism. That's why there's so much sociopathy right now. Is because we've been sold that that's not only okay, but appropriate. That your self-interest is overrides everything.
I'm just trying to pull up here. There was a quote that I saw from David Suzuki a while ago that was so beautiful, and it's very much in alignment with what we're talking about here. Yeah, he said, the way we see the world shapes the way we treat it. If a mountain is a deity, not a pile of ore, if a river is one of the veins of the land, not potential irrigation water, if a forest is a sacred grove, not timber, if other species are biological kin, not resources, or if the planet is our mother, not an opportunity, then we will treat each other with greater respect. Thus is the challenge to look at the world from a different perspective.
And that is an old perspective. That is just the ontology of animism. That is just the idea of granting everything personhood and consciousness and sacredness and immanent value, meaning that if it exists, it's of value because it's of great spirit. That 99% of all Homo sapiens adhered to that. That is it. And even I've been studying. There are these young anthropologists. When you think of, I'm a spiritual guy, but these anthropologists are kind of blowing my mind because what is that? You go. The Western mind goes to a different culture, and they learn about the culture, and they report back to the Western minds about what that culture believes. But these younger anthropologists and really good ones, certainly Joanna Macy, even before that, were doing this. But they would go into the culture and experience it from the inside, participate in the rituals, actually adopt that worldview. And then what these anthropologists are doing, go, this is so much better, I don't want to leave. And they end up selling academia or the world on that ontology that they were inside of that is so much better than the Western one. And that is indigenous mind. That is exactly what you're talking about. Brother Bear and Father Mountain and Grandfather Fire. Even the Ojibwa tribe in North America, their word for grandfather is the same word grandfather is the same word that they attribute to rocks. That they are kin, that they are part of our family. And that's just an entirely different cosmological outlook that would change everything. I just read a brilliant book about saving ecology, and it wasn't about do this, electric cars and all that, or greenhouse gases. It was about a return to animism, and that's our way out. Because with that comes just a different sense of kinship with life and care.
I think that's so important because when you're talking about that, that is the answer right there. But again,
Mhm.
that requires a massive transformation for people to genuinely start to see the planet differently, to interact differently. This is what drives me crazy with a lot of the messages around, even we talk about now, just like climate change. I feel like it's so intermixed with other stuff that has nothing to do with care and stewardship for the planet. It's tied in with other things because, out where we are, like I was talking to you before we started the show, Vancouver Island has some of the only old growth forests left and some of the real primitive out areas of Vancouver Island, and they're still logging it.
Yeah.
And these are the things where it's like, if you want to talk about things like carbon or emissions, and that you're going to take down the pillars that probably help to dissolve that more than anything on the planet, and then the still point, it just doesn't make any sense. At a certain point, you see what's going on, and then what they're telling you, and it's like, if that was really, you really cared, that would be number one. You'd stop doing certain things like that. So it's not really that, care is not, I don't think, at the heart of it. Is, I guess, where it feels for me, and I can't help but feel that. And then it gets, and this is where I think people have a hard time with being authentic, because I think this is where the confusion happens. You get mixed with a message that ultimately should be about care, and it's being sort of brought to you in a vein of it being about care, but it's not really. It's really still about money and industry, and trying to, I think, really just direct industry in another direction, and in even increasing levels of control around stuff. So, people kind of go along with certain things because they think they're doing the right thing, or they think that it's about what they think it is, but it's actually something more. And I mean, people might disagree with me on that, but when I see such obvious things that if that was really at the heart of it, this just wouldn't be done anymore, and you would change this, rather than talk about, oh, we've cut back on straws, because that's causing too much pollution, when you could be doing any number of other things.
Totally. Even when you think of sustainability, sustaining what? Continued exploitation, is that what we're doing? Even the idea of, there's a brilliant young guy, Eric Anderson, wrote a book called Unseen Beings, and I didn't know this, but the individual carbon footprint that was promulgated on us, it was a PR stunt. It does nothing. It was, and what do narcissists do? They point to you and blame you for what it is that they're doing. But it was a PR stunt by British Petroleum that has nothing to do with anything, and nor will it help anything. And I think it's also important to say, with anthropocentrism, is that it is not all humans who are participating in this kind of devastation. These are specific humans, and I hate to be doing a lot of othering, but we have to name that there are certain people who are profit driven and are getting away with the exploitation at all of our own expense, and I think we have to name that too.
Yeah, I think people need to see that, because otherwise what does happen is, it exactly like you said, it gets pointed back, and it totally reminds me of a bad relationship. When I've had conversations with people that are in a relationship where they're with a completely narcissistic partner, and everything they do always seems to come back on them. And then in spirituality circles, a lot of times that's even supported. You need to do your own inner work, your own inner shadows. And it's not that there's not a piece of that, but this is where these things get mixed together. And I feel like people don't know how to tease it apart. So then they keep looking at themselves to do better, and even though it's like they're still being manipulated and whatnot, they still feel like they need to still figure out what to sort of do.
You're saying something so important, and I just want to name it, because I think, well, on podcasts like this and this kind of audience, which is filled with empaths, and what I'm doing a lot with in my private practice with all empaths is actually letting them know that their projection of an empathic mind onto everyone else is putting them in danger. And we have to actually name that narcissism and sociopathy, these things are rampant, and we have to protect ourselves. You do not throw love and light at a narcissist and expect any sort of positive result. They are impervious to those energies. When you meet a narcissist, you run. You run. You do not participate. There is suffering in nature, but nothing in nature goes towards suffering and stays there. It gets away from it as soon as possible. And I think it's very important. I would say the lion's share of so much of my counseling work right now is actually about protection. It's actually about, we got to name what people are doing right now, what people are capable of right now, of all the work, the inner work that is not being done by Just look how they vote by a lot of the population, and we have to name that, and we have to recognize that if they are incapable or unwilling to take the medicine, they are not our work to do, and they are not to be the beneficiaries of our empathic gifts, because they will not. They will only feed off them. They will not actually take them in and say thank you and do their own work to show up and support the empathic gifts. And I think it's really important to say that out loud.
Yeah, I do too. I've seen that lots, and it's really just around you. People need to really structure different sets of boundaries and be really clear on that, because that's just an energy
Yeah.
black hole that you are just going to get drained. And the reality is it's like, and you can still be empathetic, but you can but have very strong boundaries and protect yourself around these things, because there's a lot of that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are empathetic and they're caring, I honestly feel like there's this message that you can just love enough to make everything better. And
You can't. You can't.
I
I
really
just
think
kind of
there,
think of it. I just kind of think of it like you are a spark of the divine. You are all those things. You are your highest potential realized. But get away from me.
yeah, and love yourself enough to create boundaries around that, and that's totally okay. So, and anybody out there going through that, but I often feel like that same dynamic is taking place in a global, larger perspective. I remember at one point sometimes they would show the go through the narcissistic relationship, and you'd see all these characteristics from your partner, and then you'd kind of see that's kind of what's going on with the government right at the moment. You're just kind
Yeah.
of seeing like all of the same sort of trends. So it's a time where I think the more that we get comfortable knowing ourselves, I think in all aspects we will get more and more comfortable knowing where we want to say no and we mean it. And I think this is something that we're all really practicing right now, both in our interpersonal relationships with different people, as well as things that we just don't want to consent to. Like for example, personally, it's like one thing that I get really sick of after a while is just the constant increasing of needing my personal data. It could be for anything, and now they're just wanting more and more. And there's a certain point where I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to have that service anymore. I
Yeah.
don't want that service. I will figure out something else. And I'm sure there are other brilliant minds out there that are in the process of creating new ways to do things, because they also don't want to just keep giving almost more and more of yourself over. And these are some of the challenges of the times, is then, okay, if I'm really not in alignment with that anymore and that really bugs me, but there's a bit of a cost to it, but am I in a place right now where I'm willing to accept that cost and have faith that something else is going to show up? And I feel like there's a lot of people being pushed around that, because it does feel like that. For me, that's one where the degree of just constantly siphoning off more and more personal data, it's like, why do you need all of that? We never used to have all of that. Why do you need all of this stuff? And that's something I think some people are okay with and some people just aren't.
Yeah, I totally hear you. Even something like, even something simple like road rage. When that's happening to me, and it's like you are so dysregulated that you're taking my peace of mind. You're taking my, you're promulgating a kind of violence toward me. You have so not done your work that it's fair game to do that to a stranger, and it's just something that is, it's so in the culture that it shows up all the time. And I do think you're right. I do think that there is a sense of that we are continually taken from, and we have to put up boundaries. It's not about, we're not going to all go live off the grid and go and in a grass hut, and put a bone in our nose. We're not going to do that. Yeah, I'm still using Zoom. We're using Zoom to do this. Uh, um, those things are there, but it's about how do we unplug from the stuff that it just feels like too much, just feels like exploitive, that it's just so important that we all do, and we're really being not us. I don't even think the people listening to this show, but I think a lot of people are being told by governments and even companies that I'm taking care of you. And people so desperately want to be taken care of. Jung talked about the paradise of childhood. This idea that it's a fantasy. It's something we never get. But the idea that as children we're just so cared for and loved and nurtured, and it's this fantasy idea of a kind of paradise which we never had. And so all of these adults are going into the world and saying, "Will someone take care of me?" And there are these nefarious forces that say, "Yes, I'll be your parent." And it's all about hooking you into something. And I'm being taken care of. I'm being taken care of by the strong man. I'm being taken care of by the meanie. I'm being taken care of by the bully. I'm being taken care of by whatever power structure that's in place. And that's how we're all how we're attempted to be brainwashed. That's the mental overlay onto our own and pulling us away from our own individual power and agency, which is right there. It's in your gut.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and then the locus of power gets put outside of ourselves rather than inside of ourselves, and the cycle just kind of keeps going.
Right.
I think
Right.
that's also something that's people are getting pushed to a point where I think they are wanting to claim that back, and then they're going through that process of how do you do that on these different aspects of how we're living our lives. And I think when we full circle come back to where we began, I think at the heart of that is reconnecting back to nature, because as we've said before, when you connect to nature all around us, I think we connect more deeply to our own inner nature, and then we can operate more from that place. And from there, the more I think that we connect to that, there's a strength in that. The more that I feel like we really feel that, and you know it, and you're not so confused around what you're thinking and all the different messages you're hearing, but you really start to know who you are, and you're connecting into that other sort of all those other minds that I think are very hospitable and beneficial for us to be connected to. I think then we develop a little bit more willingness, and maybe even a little bit more courage and a little bit more oomph to be able to say, no, like that's not okay. I'm not okay with that anymore. Or you know what, I don't really just don't want to support that anymore. That's not in alignment with how I see the world anymore. And so then we make different choices in our lives day to day, every one of us doing little bits. And I think that's really what creates this different type of consciousness on this planet, is from all of us making choices in alignment with nature, and then we eventually start to see some big changes happening.
Yeah, and nature, it literally teaching us two important things. If we could just adopt these two things, it teaches us power from within, not power over, but power from within. Everything in nature is following its own inner directionality toward life and its own evolution. That's the power from within. And at the same time, it's teaching us unity, because everything in nature is in symbiotic relationship with everything else in nature. And so those two things change everything. Yeah, that is an entirely different framework and way of being, and it's right there. It's right there, example, and it works. Left alone, left to its own devices, it will just keep growing and creating and becoming itself further and reaching its potential and cooperating. Even the Darwinian idea of survival of the fittest, that's largely been debunked. The fittest are actually the beings in nature that are the most cooperative and adaptive and creative with the environment. And so that's what it has to teach us.
Yeah. And in that whole process, Jonathan, it's going to completely redefine what we view as success.
Hmm.
We have this very, I think, man-made vision currently of what success means and what that looks like, particularly, and what it takes to accomplish it, and all these different things. And I think there's going to be a simplicity that's going to come in the more that we connect to nature, and we see how nature operates, and sort of what success even means. I know I'm still untethering in many ways from original concepts of success to a very different, much more grounded sense of what it feels like to be successful in this lifetime and what that means. And it's because my priorities are changing all the
Totally.
time.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make them change. They're changing. And then because my perspective and my priorities are changing, then I'm acting differently in the world because that's more what's my driving force behind it.
Well, nature exemplifies enough and self-restraint. That that there are limits, and nature knows it. It's kind of like the lion will drink from the same river next to the elk's brother that it just ate because it's full. So there is a sense of enough in nature, and to be with enough, and know that success is about enough. Doesn't mean you go without, because I think money is about the freedom to follow the promptings of spirit, of our soul, when we need to go do and be, and that we are able to pay for that. And I think that in and of itself is something that a lot of people aspire to and yearn for, and I wish for them. But that's what it is. It's about enough. But when it becomes about the hoarding and greed and getting one over just because you can, that's where I go. We're in such dark territory, and something that is so not shown or exemplified in the natural world, and that's why there's such illness. There's such mental illness right now. The DSM it has added, since its inception in 1957 or whatever it was, like 250 new mental disorders. In the last 60 years. We're now, with all the medication and all the psychological different modalities and all the healing modalities, the spirituality section at Barnes and Noble that is jam packed. That's where we are. And that is because of our disconnection from the natural law that is available to us and exemplified, that works and is healthy and is contributed to itself. And if we could just join it.
Mhm. Jonathan, as we come to the close here, any final words, maybe a couple of practical things that people can start now in this process of connecting back to nature, being able to connect back to living more freely.
Well, let me say this. I think when we start talking about ecology and we start talking about the shit show that is the world right now, I think that people can get overwhelmed, and they can even tune out and go, I'm powerless to do anything about it. So let me just say this, that what has largely been what used to be a theory and is now, or used to be a hypothesis and is now a theory. The Gaia theory says that the Earth itself acts like and behaves like a single organism, and that everything that is on the earth and in the earth is a cell or an atom that contributes to that organism. And that's us. That's us individually. And so, without ever leaving your house, without joining Greenpeace, without becoming an activist, without anything, if you just do whatever you need to do to make your cell as healthy and vibrant and loving and safe that it can be, you are doing your part and contributing to the organism. And so it's not necessarily that you have to change the world, that's on your shoulders, but just that you are not entering into dangerous situations, that you're not doing a whole lot of coping as a way of being in life, that you're not doing a lot of people pleasing, that you're not doing a lot of suffering, that you're removing yourself from those sort of circumstances, that in and of itself is contributive and is important. And so I just kind of want to say that even though we're talking cosmologies and big ideas and minds and nature and all of that, individually, it's just about curating your own life in such a way that you're part of the solution, just by having a loving, empathic heart and taking care of yourself for goodness sake, and keeping yourself safe for goodness sake, and not self-betraying for goodness sake. If we could just do that individually, and if everyone did that, we're in game changer land.
Then we made it. One thing we've done personally that I think has been really helpful too, and if people are able to, is if you can find a spot, just sit quietly sometimes. Just, I really find I actually crave it now, Jonathan, time to just be still. And it doesn't have to be for a long time, but just, and I'm not necessarily meditating or praying. I'm just being still and just trying to just, not even trying. It's like you're just being still, doing nothing, not moving. There's
Yeah.
something around that just it's like I feel like it shorts out a lot of the other stuff and lets you connect back to something deeper and older and wiser than what we often operate in.
And very simple practice is go outside and just give yourself permission. This is imagination. I could be making the whole thing up, but an imaginative attunement with the wind. An imaginative attunement with a plant. Ask the plant a question, just silently, and see what comes. That if any being, any a bee or an animal crosses your path, it absolutely does mean something. It is absolutely medicine for you. There's a Cherokee story that is about the stone people and the animal people and the plant people got together, and the animal people said, we got to kill these humans because they're assholes and they're ruining everything. And the stone people and the plant people said, who are older and have less egos than the animals, said, we can't do that. They're a part of Great Mother. So let's provide in our beingness, plants, animals, stones, natural elements, medicine. Let our own beingness be medicine for any human that asks for it. And that's what we can do. We can't kill them. They're just young and they don't know. And so when we attune in that way, when we just revere in that way, being outside, you are attuning to something that is what the basis of indigenous mind. And that is not cultural appropriation, that's empathic connection that is available to all of us through our imagination, through our hearts.
I think it's so beautiful, Jonathan, when you really do allow yourself to connect into that feeling, that they really are this older, wiser, and very, very loving and caring beings or entities. I mean, we'll sit there sometimes and it's like I can't help but be moved. I mean, you can really feel it in your heart, this sort of unconditional lovingness of even in the wrath of what people have done and disconnected from it, and mass logging or whatever it might be, and still you just feel like there's this background of love and care that's there, that yeah, I mean, I just think it's really beautiful.
If you think of the Big Bang to now, 4.5 billion years, that the Homo sapien as we know it, if the Big Bang, the beginning of the Earth, is January 1st on a proverbial calendar, some sort of symbolic calendar, the emergence of humans is it's December 31st, 11:59 and 40 seconds. That is the scope of how short a time we've actually been here. And so it does have so much to teach us. And we are here for a reason. There's not too many of us. The mother birthed all of us for a purpose, but we have to, but because of our free will, I don't know why she did this. I don't know why she gave us this. We can turn away from her, and that's the conundrum that we all face right now. Or we can align with her as beings of Earth, birthed by her.
Yeah, and that has been a really central message that's come through in different ways, in different language, but a return to that. After this long separation, disconnect, that's where we're moving. And there's a big shakeup around all of it. But Jonathan, that was wonderful. Always enjoy chatting with you. We're going to have to do this again. Where can people learn more about what's going on for you? I know you got a few different things going on. You got an upcoming course coming. You got a new book you're thinking about. Where can
Yeah.
people learn more about what's going on for you?
JonathanHammond.com. You can find me. I do private work as well. I have a Shift Network course that's going to be about ecology and psychology and sociology and anthropology and all of those things. It's sort of a combination of a lot of what we're talking about and healing. That hasn't been announced yet, but that'll be on my website. You can join my mailing list on there. I have a book, The Shaman's Mind: Who Knew Wisdom to Change Your Life. I have an audio course called The Shaman Within. These are all things you just look up my name. You'll find those products. Um, yeah, so that's sort of what I'm doing.
I'll put those links in the show notes and people can all check that stuff out. If you haven't checked out the work, go and check it out. The Shaman's Mind's a really beautiful book. Lots of practical stuff too, where you guys can actually start to apply things right off the bat. And yeah, if you enjoyed this, then tune into the other episodes we've done with Jonathan as well. Lots of beautiful wisdom shared by this man. So, Jonathan, much appreciation. Always a pleasure.
Aloha, mahalo. Thank you. Thanks for having me.